We're going to look at another very, very significant and important area. And in a way, what we're going to look at now helps balance what we just looked at before. And I'm going to show you a marvelous parable. We say here God's right is founded in His value. What is the basis of moral obligation? That sounds a strange phrase. Why is it that you ought to give your life to God? That is a very important question. Why should you give your life to this God? Now, how many girls here do we have that are single? Put your hands up. Okay? Don't put them too high because the guys will see. All right. What say there's a guy who really likes you? I mean, he really, really likes you. On what basis ought you to decide I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this person? Now, let's just say he's very powerful. He's really big. His shoulders are this wide. He has arms like the rear end of an elephant. He's very powerful. He could knock anybody to glory that looks sideways at you, see? That is an attribute he has. But does that give him a right to rule your life? Some men think so, and they're wrong. What about if, for instance, he loves you? He loves you so much that he calls you day and night, and every time you turn your phone on, it's him. And see, does that give him a right to rule your life? But what if he gives gifts to you? All night he's stacking up things outside your door. Does that give him a right to rule your life? What if he knows everything about you? He's been on an internet search and he can tell you when you were born. He can tell you stuff about yourself that you don't even know. Does that give him a right to rule your life? What if he's really nice? That's a great plus. It's awful to live with a guy who hates you. You know? Does that give him a right to rule your life? Now we have to change this metaphor. What if he actually made you? His name is Dr. Frankenstein, and he made you. Now we're getting closer to the thing. Does that give him a right to rule your life? Frankenstein's monster didn't think so. Well, what if he died for you? That's why he's got the bolt in his head. Does that give, do you see what I'm saying? We assign God's right on people's lives to either power or to the knowledge he has. All those things are true. He did die for us. He does love us. He does, all of these things are true about God. But none of those, if we took just to a regular human level, would we assign as the reason why you do anything. All these may help, depending on the situation. It's great to have a very powerful boyfriend. When you yourself aren't that powerful, you haven't taken 8 years of kung fu and stuff, and he has. That's good. If you came from an abused background, it's nice to have somebody who's kind and gentle and loving. That's great. You know? But we're actually looking at the reason why people do anything. So what we're looking at is what we call the basis of moral obligation. Why this and not that? Why him and not somebody else? And that's a basic question any person who's a non-Christian will ask. Why Jesus? Now I'm going to take you to one of the greatest parables in the whole of the Scriptures. It's very simple. It's actually a 3-part parable, and you find it in Matthew 13. It has to do with treasure. Almost invariably, probably every 2 or 3 months, a movie will come out about a treasure hunt or television series about some kind of treasure thing. We love treasure. We love discovering. We have some story about somebody who unearthed this huge thing. And now, we have, in Matthew 13, we actually have 3 little parables. Parable in the Bible, word para and bole, you've got 2 words. Bole is where we get the word ball from. It's something you throw down. And a para is beside. So a parable is something thrown down beside something that helps you understand it. So Jesus gives three parables here, and they begin in Matthew 13, following one of the most important parables, I believe the most important parable we'll come back to and look a little bit later. And that is the parable of the sower and the soils. And why that's important we'll look at in just a little minute. But what I want for you to see is these three little passages. Verse 44, verse 45, and verse 46. The biggest of these is three different parables here, three different illustrations. The largest one of these three different ones is the first one. Each one has to do with the kingdom of heaven and what it's like. So here's what Jesus said. The kingdom of heaven is like to treasure hidden a field, which when a man has found, he hides, and for joy, he goes and sells all that he has and he buys the field. The second, the kingdom of heaven, again, is like a merchant man seeking goodly pearls, who when he has found one pearl of great price, he went and sold all that he has and he buys that. So what we're looking at here is this idea of somebody who is willing to go to lengths to get something they really, they've put this, in other words, they're putting something above everything else they've done. The man with the goodly pearls, he just doesn't, he's got a lot of pearls. But this one, the pearl of great price, he's willing to sell all the other pearls he's got and get this one. So what I want you to see here is this. Ask yourself this question. Why does that man sell everything he's got? So I'm going to take this and just like blow it up for you a bit. Here's a man, and he's taking a shortcut back home. He's usually catches the bus back home, but he decides he will take a shortcut at this particular time. And what he's going to do, he goes through an excavation site. Now, he's not really strictly supposed to be there, but they've ripped down buildings that have been there for 100 years or more, and they've just basically cleaned the whole thing out, and they've dug way, way down, and there's a field. It's pretty broken up. And he is walking past. And as he walks, just sort of looking at what's been done in there, he sees a for sale sign. And as he's looking at it, he trips on something that nearly breaks his toe. He looks down, and it seems like there's a box, an old box, really old box, is sticking out a bit from the ground. And his trip has broken the end off of it. And he looks down at that, and he thinks, look at that, it's an old box. And the end has been broken off of this box, and he thinks, I wonder if there's anything in that box. Now, it's a bit scary when you get a box that's been there for a couple of 100 years, maybe. Put your hand in just to see what's there. But he tries to dig around. It seems to go down a long, long way. So he takes the risk, and he sticks his hand in it, and he feels like a bunch of things there. So he's pulling on one, and it comes out, and he pulls this dull yellow, heavy metal object. It looks a bit like a coin, and it's quite heavy. He thinks, I wonder what this is. So as he's going through the field, he's cutting out through town to get his bus, and then he comes across a coin shop, and he goes, I wonder if that guy knows anything about this. So he goes in and he throws this down on the counter, and he goes, excuse me. And the guy looks at it, and he says, is this worth anything? And the guy looks at it, and he goes, excuse me. He goes out the back, and he comes back, and he goes, yes, it's worth something. You want to sell it? He goes, yeah. And he goes, well, I'll give you $20 for it. The guy goes, no, I think I'll keep it. I'll give you $100 for it. No, I don't think I'll give you $5,000 for it, all right? He goes, what is it? He says, where did you get this? He says, well, tell me what it is. He says, it's a rare old coin. He says, how much is it worth? He goes, about $40,000. The guy runs back to the field. See that? He runs back. He sees some people wandering around the field, looking at. Yeah, we could turn this into a parking lot. It'd be good. We'll have to excavate, though. We'll have to clean down at least another story. And you know what he does? He stands in front of the box, just looking. He waits till they go, and then he's trying to get he can't dig. It's way down that box. There's all kinds of stuff. He's like that squirrel in Ice Age. He finally gets his hand around something, but it's not like all that other stuff. It's all wired, and he pulls this thing, and it's big. It's about like a very large duck egg, and it's transparent, and it's red. And he looks at that, and he sticks that under his jersey, see, and then he cuts back, and then he sees another jewelry store, and he thinks, I wonder if this is something. And he puts this on the counter, boom. He says, excuse me, what is this? The guy goes, then he goes out the back, excuse me, FBI, is that? Has there been any major robberies? He comes back, he said, where did you get this? He said, I found it. He says, what is it? You don't know what it is? Oh, I know it's valuable. He goes, this is the biggest ruby I've ever seen. I've never heard of one this big. It's a real ruby. How much is it worth? I don't know. I couldn't even put a price on this. 40 million? He runs home, forget the bus. He kicks the door off its hinges, he doesn't care. He runs in to his wife, he goes, sell the house, sell the car, sell the boat, sell the kids. No, we can keep the kids. Sell everything, sell. She goes, we just bought this house. This is the dream. Sell it all. Why? She says, I'm going to buy a field. Now watch this guy. Everybody thinks it's like Close Encounters. He's lost his marbles. Because every time I can sell this bike, I can get another $100. He's laughing. He's enjoying selling what he's got. He's enjoying getting rid of what he's got. And everybody's looking at him and go, you know about this guy? He just really wigged out. He was so sharp a guy, and now he's not like making mud pies in his front room, but he is he's selling everything he's got to buy this dumb field. And I ask you a question, is he stupid? Not when he finally puts a huge electric fence around that thing, and he digs that box out which goes 20 foot down and is packed, where he can not only buy his house, car, but the town and the nation, and 4 or 5 other nations as well. Is he stupid? So I'm going to ask you the question. Why is he having so much fun getting rid of what he's got? Because what he's seen in the field is worth more than anything else he's ever seen in his life. He's not stupid. That is the way people actually make choices. The intrinsic value obligates. You can write it down if you like. The value of something in itself is the thing that says, pick me, not this. But do you see, it is the value of the thing in itself that obligates. And this parable teaches a very simple and a very wonderful thing. When we give our lives to God, the reason why we make any choices at all ultimately comes up all the way to Him. We pick things because we perceive this is more significant, important, valuable than anything else. The value of a thing in itself obligates. And the root and basis of our moral obligation to give our lives to God is simply He is the most beautiful, valuable, wonderful person in the whole universe. And that's what the Scriptures give us. I'll say, I have to hold this up and do things. That's it. Good. I'll put it like this. God's right to rule our lives is not founded in His power, His creation priority, the fact that He made us, or even His ability to save us or bring gifts to us or love us. It is founded in who He is, not just what He does. God's laws are descriptions of reality. They are not inventions. They're not made up. They're not, and we'll go into some detail on this later on. But just to say, for a start, God's laws are not primarily motivation. They are description. They're not the reason why you should do things. They are simply describing the truth of the thing that God says. And the difference between preaching the rights of God in a person's life without this vision of who he is that in one case you simply take a word and try to lay it on people's lives. The other, it's coming out of the reality of what is actually there. God's laws, then, are descriptions, not primarily motivations. They are not inventions. They cannot be arbitrarily changed or wisely ignored. You can ignore the law of God, but you ought not to do it for a very simple reason. It is a description of what is true. My favorite illustration in this, I have a son who is grown up to be a young man, but he almost didn't. Here in New Zealand, where we have 240, 250 volts, and our plug, not in America where they only have wussy 110, I caught my only son with a pair of metal-bladed scissors, and he's like 2 or 3, about to insert those scissors into a wall socket. Now, I know I'm a terrible father, I should have little plastic covers for all things, but times are hard in the evangelistic field, and it was an open socket. And I watched my son as he's just about to do this. See that? And I yelled at him. Now I'm a mild-mannered evangelist. So I said, Billy, don't do that. He got a big fright. See? But you know what, kids? They're going to do something, and you stop them, then they're going to show you what they're going to do by doing it. So and he's about to put it in again. I said to him, Billy, if you do that, I'll smack your butt. That was a terrible, non-politically correct thing to do. But you see, in a 2-year-old brain, I couldn't explain to him frying neural pathways and volts and amps and stuff like that. I just said to him, you do that, I'll smack your butt. He understood smack your butt. He had some experiences in life that corresponded with these things. Now, you might think it was a bad thing to tell him that, but I still have a son, and he's gorgeous. See that? And sometimes God sees nations. And he's the only one who sees the whole thing. None of us do. He sees it all. He sees exactly what happens if this happens and if that happens. He sees the corridors that nations take long before we can even guess where a stupid choice will take us. And he will sometimes say, if you do that, I'll smack your butt. And we in our great wisdom, well, we've been around for at least 100 years. We're quite capable of working things out by ourselves, really. You think you can smack our butt, eh? You better be glad that he will say that. Sometimes they'll say stuff like, let us alone. And you'll have these frightening scriptures. He gave them their request. Sometimes I've had people come to me and they've said, you know, I used to think that God forbade this kind of sexual lifestyle I have. But, you know, I kept asking him. And after a while he said, go ahead. And they thought it was quite wonderful. And I started to weep. Because I realized that was it. He'd told them again and again and again. And then he said, go ahead. Because when you get the consequences of what he sees so clearly, not only will you be hurt and the world around you, but he will be.